This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Play, a leading game developer providing player favorites to the most successful brands across the industry. With an award-winning multi-product portfolio of slots, live casino, bingo, virtual sports, and more, Pragmatic Play is powering up new possibilities of play through one single API. Visit pragmaticplay.com and discover your favorite every time.
David Yatom, the General Counsel of Soft2Bet, is here with us today. First and foremost, David, how are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. It's an absolute pleasure. And I want to set the tone here a little bit today of what we are talking about. The topic obviously is thriving in a difficult industry climate, and going a little bit deeper into Soft2Bet and the success that you've seen in the company, because you guys are a quite interesting company in the sense that you are specifically targeting regulated markets, a lot of them being located in Europe. At the same time, a lot of B2Cs especially are struggling in the regulated environment in Europe today, particularly the kind of tier 2 operators. But you guys have found really good success in your business. So I just want to kind of start off, David. I know that you guys talk about your finances here and there from time to time. I understand you can't go too deep into the details, but can you first and foremost just talk about the success that you've had in Soft2Bet in the last couple of years?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I think it's a joint effort in our attempt to penetrate as many regulated markets as we can through licenses that we acquire from this is the main effort that we put on, at least since I joined the company. These licenses are the foothold of what drives our success, and this is where we see the future. This past year, we've acquired licenses in Greece and in Romania and in Italy very recently. And what we're trying to do is to aim to acquire much more so that we can expand our operation. Obviously, this is done very carefully. We don't expand without any prior thinking or prior consideration. I think that one of the things that maybe smaller operators are struggling with is penetrating the market where they don't really understand and they don't really know how to make money in, and that creates losses. Taking into account also the cost that is involved in penetrating those markets is something that contributes to their, let's say, quicker demise of the smaller operators. We're doing our homeworks before that, and we're heavily invested in properly approaching those markets.
Yeah, brilliant, David. And still, digging into this a little bit deeper, what in your opinion has changed in the industry in the last, say, 5 or 10 years? So how has the industry evolved, especially from a European perspective? Because as you mentioned here, a lot of the operators have maybe not done their homework on the locally regulated markets. But at the same time, if we rewind the tape, say 5 or 10 years, they were profitable at that stage. We've seen a lot of formerly successful businesses that are today not that successful. Can you talk about how the industry has evolved, and why is it that these companies have gone from profitable to struggling?
Oh, I think I remember the industry 10 years ago. It was completely different. It was the landscape was the regulatory landscape, I would say, was much more flexible back in the days. I remember when applications to the UKGC were done on paper, right? I mean, this is a really ancient history. Obviously, regulators have identified the potential that comes with online gambling. It's a very lucrative market, and they've set out to make some money out of it. In the past, the unregulated markets have they've allowed a lot of operators to work in a much more flexible environment than what they are right now. This changed regulations brought with it a lot of barriers to entry, and only the big operators are now being more successful. I think it has its obviously it has its benefits, but it also has its cons. It creates clarity, so it's much more clearer for operators to understand how they can or cannot operate in the market. But on the other side, when regulation increases, it pushes out smaller operator, and it also indirectly contributes to offshore offering, which provides a much bigger advantage to those that are operating the same markets in an unregulated space or an offshore space, as opposed to those that are getting licenses. So regulatory landscape changed massively. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And in the US, it's quite clear, for example, that the market has turned into a market for the big players, right? You have like the big four over there with DraftKings, Flutter, Caesars, and MGM that owns more than 90% market share of all the states combined. And in Europe, that has not been the case traditionally. It's been flooded with many operators, but I get the feeling that we are maybe moving towards a more consolidated space, even in Europe, where potentially only the big players will thrive as we move forward, and the big players will consolidate and acquire smaller of the local heroes. We saw Flutter just the other day acquiring a local hero in Serbia, for example. Do you think that is a risk in Europe as well, that we'll be left with only a couple of kind of massive operators at the end, or is there still a chance for smaller operators to thrive?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I am very familiar with the situation in the US, coming previously from DraftKings, and I do appreciate that there's, the big operators in the US are quite predatory when it comes to being first to market. And it's quite easy to go from one market to the other in the US. From a regulatory perspective, once you penetrate one single state, then it's quite, you have the bedrock to go to any other state. In the US, in Europe, it's a little bit different. The regulatory landscape from one territory to the other one could change drastically. So it's a little bit more difficult, but I do see, and I do anticipate that there's going to be much more consolidation, especially when it comes to those operators that are operating in a regulatory manner. Okay, so I've started out in your previous question to focus on, some of the advantages that offshore operators have in these markets. I don't think that they will be affected. I think that this doesn't speak to them because it's not an issue. But small scale operators working in regulated environment based on a license that they've acquired, that they've put money and efforts into, will struggle. Will struggle because, let me just give you Romania as an example. We started off a license there a few months ago, having a certain anticipation as to what the market would be. And we've learned quite recently that there's going to be a much stringent regulation when it comes to license fees, and when it comes to guarantees that you need to put in place in order to become a player in these markets. So small scale operators that are now required to put in place these quite considerable amount will be pushed out. So the other option to being pushed out is to try to consolidate with an existing business. And yes, I do anticipate that it will happen more frequently. Right now, you will see more and more acquisition of big players, of smaller scale operation that they can manage and operate. But it comes with a risk for them as well, because as I mentioned before, the expansion is what hits even the big guys. So we'll see. It's going to be a very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And you mentioned a couple of times here the proliferation of the offshore market in Europe and the rest of the world that is taking place right now. And there is seemingly two forces at play right now in the industry. One force which is pulling the industry more towards regulation, and another force which is pushing the industry away from regulation into the offshore market. And especially as a tier two, as a small operator, as you point out here, take Romania as an example, there's a lot of friction in many markets to operate in a regulated environment, whereas the offshore operators do not have to deal with this additional friction for the players and so on. So you guys are interested in that way, that many of your competitors, I think, have chosen to go down the route of the unregulated space of the market, but you guys are doubling down on the regulated space, of course. Can you talk about like the decision to go to focus on the regulated side of the market when seemingly a lot of the industry is moving away from that territory at the moment?
Yeah, no, I know it seems like a very weird decision to make, but our focus is the future, right? So we know that you need to make certain sacrifices along the way in order to become more attractive later on. And I think that's the goal. That's where Soft2Bet is aiming for. Right? You can, on the one hand, make a lot of money working in a certain way or manner that we chose not to. Right? We've put a lot of efforts to make sure that our path towards the future is paved in a way that we can demonstrate and we can believe in. We can believe that other regulators will see this effort. So this is the reason why we're taking this route. Okay. Now others might say, you know what, I don't care about the future. I'm very interested in making money right now, and that's their own decision. That's not the one that we've chosen, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah, fair enough. So you should be for sure. And if we look at just as an overview of the markets in general today, and where do you see opportunity in the regulated space, particularly? Are there any markets that are heating up, in your opinion, at the moment that operators should be looking at right now? Again, I've mentioned Serbia here. That was the latest acquisition target of Flutter. Seems to be a market that is heating up, Balkan, and so on. Can you talk from your perspective? What and why are some markets that we should keep an eye on right now?
I was quite surprised about these smaller markets, so to speak. So everybody's speaking about the big ones, like obviously the UK and Italy and Sweden and Greece. Some of those that we've chosen to concentrate on. The thing is, and we started this. I'm going back to your first question again. Really need to choose a specific strategy, and what does this strategy encompass, right? You also need to understand what is the saturation of the market. Okay, let me take US for an example because it's easier for me. You have New Jersey. You have a certain number of operators that are issued with skins that can populate the market. Well, on the other hand, you have Pennsylvania. We don't have that restriction. It's going to be much more difficult to pursue a market share in Pennsylvania than it would be in New Jersey. Setting aside the really big operators. So the situation is very, very similar in Europe. Well, you also have to add to that certain barrier to entry in those markets. But there are markets, very unique ones that nobody have put a lot of attention to. Markets that also present benefits from many perspectives. One, less saturated, which is always great. Two, maybe premature regulations that can allow you to work in a much more flexible environment. And three, it gives you an opportunity to become, now I wouldn't say first to market, but one of the first. It gives you an opportunity to blossom and grow. Now, if you take MaxBet as an example, the latest acquisition, that's another way to expand into a market, right? You might be a little bit too late to the party. You identify a market that is great. You look for an operator that already has a substantial or an existing operation, and you just mount on that, and you put your own experience and thought and technology into the product that already exists, and you can explode, right? And I'm a true believer in that approach. I think just to give the smaller player an opportunity, the smaller market an opportunity, you might be surprised.
Yeah. So do you envision Soft2Bet? I know that you guys have done a couple of acquisitions yourself, sometimes in order to gain licenses, like here recently. But do you envision Soft2Bet continuing to grow through M&A? Is that the strategy for you guys?
Yeah, definitely. We're looking for M&A opportunities and acquisition opportunities on two fronts. There's obviously the regulatory expansion. The easiest way to penetrate a market, just as the latest example that we've seen, is through an acquisition of an existing operation, one that you believe that you can make a difference in. And so that's one.
On the other side, setting aside the regulatory expansion and market expansion, you also have acquisition that enhance your technology. And this speaks of our intention to make our company more valuable. The valuation of the company increases if you improve your product. So if there's any interesting product that comes along, then yes, we identify it, then yes, we will be we'll be pitching up for it. We'll be looking for these new interesting opportunities, and also help those smaller scale suppliers or developers that I meet all the time to grow and expand. We offer a lot of opportunities for them to do so. It's not only a merger and acquisition. We really take the talent and we enhance it. We bring it on board, they're part of the family, and hopefully part of the success as well.
Yeah, fair enough. And also, just to understand the company a bit better, David. So Soft2Bet obviously is a turnkey solution. You offer a big range of product on a B2B perspective, but also you also run B2C operators yourself as well. Can you talk about that balance within your company between the B2B and B2C? Which is the most important part for you guys? How do you see growth in the future? Is it B2B, B2C? Can you define the company a bit, maybe?
Yeah. One relies on the other. That's the magic, right? We have our B2C operation. We have our own offering, which we constantly enhance. We develop products. We develop designs and features and gamification elements that we use on our own operation, and then we scale it up so that we can offer it to our clients, to our operators as well. And the beauty in it is that we already have a proven record, right? We invest a lot in our websites, in our offering, to make it much more unique than others. We found that a lot of casino providers, a lot of sportsbook providers, they have a generic offering, and you see something different in the landscape. And you design the videos, the player engagement that we have through our gamification features. That is something that people look at, and it says, I want to have that. I want to have the same thing. And then they come over to us and we bring it to them and we show them that we can do this for them. And they're all very excited. So the B2C complements the B2B. It's like the best demo you can have. Right?
Yeah.
It's already out there. Right?
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, but I remember, a couple of years ago, Aspire Global, before they were acquired by Neo Games, that then were acquired by Aristocrat, when Aspire Global built a similar kind of proposition with like a full turnkey kind of offering, and also they were running their B2C operation that was then offloaded. So Aspire decided to offload B2C in order to focus on B2B completely. And their argument was like they didn't want to spread themselves too thin by doing everything. They wanted to give more focus and attention to B2B. Is there a risk, like when you run a company like Soft2Bet with so many different verticals and products, that you can run the risk of spreading yourself too thin, or is this like shotgun approach?
I appreciate the Aspire example. I can give you my own personal example from SBTech. We had the same decision, right? And it proved to be a good decision eventually. But it's one way to look at the operation. There's obviously risk, right? When you expand yourself too much from a technological perspective, then you need to bring more people so that you can allow yourself to offer your services in a good way, in a good manner, in a professional manner to your clients. So yes, when you shift focus, that could potentially be a disadvantage. But luckily enough, we have a very big team, and we're constantly recruiting, and that allows us to basically meet up expectation. If the decision later on will be to shift focus, then fine, we might pick one over the other. Right now, it makes sense. Right now, I am a strong believer in the complementary of one to the other. We will definitely need to set some sort of Chinese walls when we grow a little bit bigger, more bigger than what we are right now. But we're ready for that. We've put in place the mechanism to do so, and we will if needed. Right now, the risk is already accounted for and calculated. So
fair enough.
Although there.
Oh, there. And, jumping over to the US a little bit, because I saw that you guys are exhibiting at G2E in a couple of weeks, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in person here, David, by the way. What's the strategy for you guys when you look at a massive market like the US? Are you looking at that from a B2B perspective, B2C, or both?
The approach that we've discussed before is exactly the same one that we want to implement in the US. We look at the market on the both perspective. We chose very specific territory in which we feel that we will be. It's not saturated, that we believe that we will be successful in, that we believe that our product is going to be unique in, that we'll try to attract as many operators as we can. And once we've established that market share that we're looking for, that could be the bedrock of our B2B offering. So we want to show the American market, as much as we've shown the European market, that our product is suitable for them. Not only suitable, then our product is going to make them more profitable. And we're a very strong believer in that approach. If we have our own operation there to show for it, then I believe that will make the difference. We could have made the approach of simply, sorry.
Yeah, so how do you approach that proposition in the US? Because over in the US, you have this kind of stubborn trend, especially amongst the bigger operators, that they want to integrate vertically. Obviously, coming from SBTech, you know that very well. That DraftKings chose to bring this company together in the fold. How do you make that pitch to operators when they prefer to own the tech themselves generally?
Well, that's a very interesting question that we haven't tackled just yet. I'm sure that if an interesting proposition will come along, then we will consider it. Somebody smart taught me that you never say no. You don't regret on the things you do or being asked for, but those that you haven't. So if the offer comes along, we will look at it. I think that everything that we do right now actually leads us towards that proposition. So if they want a full vertical, then by all means we will consider this, and we'll figure out how we can cooperate from there.
Fair enough. Moving over to Europe again and looking at regulated markets and territories. Obviously, David, as the general counsel of Soft2Bet, your speciality, of course, is to understand various regulations and opportunities in the regulated markets over here and in the rest of the world. What markets do you feel are regulated correctly, if you can put that in air quotes, today in Europe? Are there any jurisdiction that has gotten the regulation right? Because again, a lot of operators are struggling on the back of the fact that they are too restricted by operators. Germany is a good example, right, with way too high taxes and restrictions on how to play and so on. In your opinion, what are some of the shining examples of actually decent regulation in Europe?
Yeah, I think you'll find it surprising. First of all, the examples that you presented are spot on. Germany is a very difficult market. I would say the taxation is an issue, but I think that the restrictions on advertisements are actually much more difficult for operators to comply with, right? Because it feels like some regulators simply they just want the license fees, but then other than that, they don't want operators to operate in their markets, and that's a problem. I feel that a too stringent or too strict regulation anywhere is a huge problem. I'm a strong believer in self-regulation, right? My previous history comes from data protection. And in data protection, what people have done is that they give a set of regulations, very clear regulations, and they expected people to comply with them. I think this is something you need to apply in gaming as well. But you need to provide individuals and operators with rules that they can comply with that makes sense, right? If you provide an operator with a license like the one you provide in Italy, but then you tell them, you know what, but you cannot make any advertising whatsoever. That is a big concern. I actually find that Romania has a pretty decent regulation. It offers flexibility. It offers relatively easy
mechanism to obtain a license. I know that right now there's some changes in regulation that created a much difficult barrier to entry, but I think it allows for a flexible environment. And then in those small markets, the ones like the one that we've discussed, it also presents a regulatory regime on the one hand, but one that doesn't interfere too much with the operations of the operator. Now, I'm not saying throw everything out the window. I'm just saying have a little faith in your operators. You know? It'll go a long way. And what I've seen previously is that if you have an operator that really cooperates with you, like the MGA back in the days, they would sit down with you, they would listen exactly what is the concern of the industry. And if you have an operator that really listens and understands and implements, that is something that I want to see. That is something I want to see. This is a good regulation. But yeah, the examples that you give are the ones that I'm a little bit concerned of, and hopefully they'll sense up and try to make it try to have a little bit more faith.
Yeah, for sure. What would you say, David, are the biggest challenges that you face today with Soft2Bet? Obviously, the company is experiencing exponential growth. You are choosing this really difficult path down the regulated trail that might present challenges short term, but then opportunities long term, as you pointed out earlier here. But as you move ahead here, what's the biggest challenges that you have for the company at the moment?
Yeah, I think you said it yourself. We're going into a lot of regulatory markets that creates a lot of challenges from many perspectives. We always need to stay compliant, so we need to keep up with the regulations themselves. That takes a legal and compliance challenge. That's something that I'm personally responsible for. But that translates also to a technological challenge, because if you need to make changes, that you need to have more people invested on these sort of projects, and that takes you away from the expansion that you're trying to make, and any potential clients or development that you're having in your pipeline. So that is a struggle. Plus, when you operate in this market, you might have other restrictions like marketing. So you have to deal with something that you might have not expected initially. Unfortunately, I've seen some regulators in Europe not taking a more holistic European approach and started implementing independent legislation. Romania, once again, is one example. I hope that they will follow a correct path moving forward, that they will consult with the industry in a way that will encourage operators to come into the market, as opposed to leaving due to the problems that we'll have. But I don't think that our challenge is very different than the challenge that other operators face. The only difference is that we have to face it in a lot of jurisdictions. But that's good, because it just means that we're expanding. That's a good challenge.
It keeps you busy, David. You don't need to be bored at work. That's for sure.
No. That's what they're paying me for.
Exactly. And so, if we look at the iGaming industry, if we zoom out a bit and maybe we look forward for the next 3 to 5 years, let's say, can you make any predictions about where we will be as an industry at that time? Will we see the kind of offshore market? Will it be squeezed? Will it be thriving at that time? Will we see more sensible regulation? Will we see more regulation in kind of more and more jurisdictions? Will tier 2 operators, will they be able to thrive again? Give us your best kind of predictions of where the industry is moving towards, let's say, in the next 3 to 5 years. It's a big question here, but
yeah, no, it's a. Luckily, I'm recorded, so we can check it out in a few more years. But I think
exactly.
I think we'll see a relative decrease in the next couple of years, because I see more and more regulations implementing license regime as we go along. Okay, so this is a change that encompasses the entirety of Europe and a lot more others. I mean, we focus on Europe. Let's not forget we have South America. That's a huge market that's also being regulated. So you'll see slowly and surely, when you see operators that are currently operating in those territories that have a much more riskier, have a lot more risk when they operate and offer into a certain market, that they will have to pull out. There's no doubt about it. From what I've seen, regulators do want to implement those regulations because it is beneficial for them. They get license fees. Even Curacao is doing it right now, right? So you will see a decrease in, I would say, the next couple of years, 2 to 3 years. But I think that once the realization of and the certainty of those regulations is established, you will see a new wave of operators starting to operate in these markets. I think that the bigger players will get bigger. They will be more prominent in those markets because if you have lower lower amount of operators operating in the same market, then the big ones can poach all of the operators. So it will be difficult, but hopefully, the industry will manage. And I think, by the way, I think the versatility and the ability to have a lot more operator is a good thing for the industry. I'm not talking about from the gambling perspective, but from the competitive perspective. You want to have more operators operating in the market. You want to have a more competitive environment. If you squeeze out everybody, like what the regulators are doing right now, this is going to create a whole different kind of issue, like monopolies and people that they don't care about the client so much, right? They don't care about the product. They're free to act in the market as they please, and that's always bad.
Yeah, so for sure. We want to have a competitive landscape for sure. Like, David, you mentioned Latin America as well, and I want to just jump over briefly to that continent as well. We're traveling the world here together today. Latin America seems to be very volatile in jurisdictions, either moving towards regulation, but then the next day, seemingly, they are moving away from regulation. Brazil has been on and off for a long time. I read as well the other day that Chile is now moving 180 degrees and actually asking operators to leave the market and taking a step back there. It seems to be a really difficult continent just for the volatility that is taking place in the various jurisdictions there. Can you talk a little bit about just your view on Latin America, perhaps where the opportunities lie, or which of these jurisdictions you should be a little bit more careful about, perhaps?
Latin America is an amazing market. Huge number of people. I do appreciate that the player value there is a little bit lower, but the sheer amount of number of people is just what makes it a profitable market. I've been hearing that Brazil is going to regulate since the day I joined the gambling industry. So it's been on and off for many years now. It's very difficult to predict how this market is going to play out. It's also very difficult to apply enforcement on offshore when it comes to such a big country, and most of the countries in Latin America are exactly that. So, I think that the infrastructure there is not set up to deal with these sort of things. So, it'll be interesting to see how they're going to maneuver around this sort of regulation. I do think that we will see a similar trend to what we've seen in Europe, where if Brazil, for example, goes through with the regulation, then other countries, neighboring countries, will say, well, we can do the same. Why not? If Brazil did it, we should do it as well. And I think that's the trend that you will see slowly in South America as well. And it's actually good, right? Because we started off with the fact that certainty is something that you do want to see, right? When you're operating in these sort of markets and you have uncertainty for 10 years, you don't know, right? You might have been operating in Brazil for the last 5 years, and then you as a regulated operator, you decide you want to get licensed, and people tell you, well, you know what, you can't because you've done this and that and that and that. So sooner than later is better. But again, you also have to be very minded regarding the operators, right? If they enact legislation, putting regulation that will completely prevent operators from operating in the market, or put a much stringent barrier on the entry of new operators, they're going to lose what they're trying to achieve, and that's going to be a shame. It's just going to help the bigger ones to become much more bigger than. And then it ties up with the competitive landscape that we're just going to lose, and who's going to get hurt eventually? The end users. Right? You want to make them fun, right? Enjoy.
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough. And to round off here today a bit, David, as well, just going back into Soft2Bet as well and the trajectory and journey that you guys are on right now, where do you see the business in 3 to 5 years' time, let's say? When we do this repeat, I hope we do it sooner than that, by the way, but let's say that we are back here in 4 years' time. Like, how will the conversation look like then? Where is the company at that time, do you think?
I want to see this company a market leader when it comes to the iGaming industry. I want to see it in a more prominent position when it comes to the offering of B2B. I'm hopeful to see it as a major player in the US and still as a major player in the European market. And I just hope for the best for the company, and I am a strong believer in it. I think we're on our way there.
Yeah, absolutely. No, the trajectory is incredible in Soft2Bet, and I've had the pleasure to follow you guys for the last couple of years. I've visited you guys in Cyprus, and it's been a pleasure, of course. It's a super exciting company with a lot of really great personalities within the organization as well. So thank you so much, David, for today. It's been really great to get to know your plans and thoughts a bit better. And again, just I think in this really challenging environment where a lot of organizations are moving towards the gray markets and the offshore markets. The fact that you guys are doubling down on the regulated environment is really great to see, and it's obviously great for the integrity of the industry. So best of luck with the future, David, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in Vegas in a couple of weeks.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me.